Item number 10, general items. So we have a request for water and/or wastewater connections outside the city limits presented by Diane Langley, Interim City Manager. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So this was an item that was brought before Council at the last meeting, and Council directed staff to continue it to this meeting for further discussion. So the city periodically receives requests from property owners located outside of the city to receive city water or sewer services. These requests are typically prompted by three different reasons. One being a developer wants to build and they want to receive city water and sewer. A property has a failing on-site septic system and needs to either repair or replace their system or connect to city sewer. And then also you have individuals who voluntarily want to connect to city water or sewer. So past practice has been that the city requires the execution of extraterritorial service agreements, also known as utility service agreements or tri-party agreements. Prior to 2011, there were about 60 or so of these agreements that have been executed. Some have been recorded, some have not. Around 2011, as part of a water extension project to Franklin School along Franklin Road, we also connected some subdivisions to city water, and we required that those subdivisions annex to the city in order to receive city water. Also, in 2011, City Council adopted short-term ordinances that allowed people to connect to city water without requiring execution of the agreements. So before you tonight, we have three different options, or actually four different options for discussion. There are multiple options, that these are the four that are being presented. Number one would be to allow connection with no requirements. Staff does not recommend this option. Number two would be allow connection with execution of an extraterritorial service agreement. So anytime a property was going to develop or needed to connect to city water and sewer, it would come before council for approval to execute the agreement. Number three is require annexation prior to connection. And then number four is a hybrid model that would allow properties with failing systems to connect with the execution of an extraterritorial service agreement, but still require new development to annex prior to connection. It would also require larger developments that want to connect to city services to annex prior to connection. So to just give a couple specific examples, you have Lincoln Road right here, Highway 99. So right here you have a fourplex at the northeast corner of Lincoln and Barrett. They have a failing on-site septic system. So under this hybrid model, they would be required to execute an extraterritorial service agreement with the city since they have a failing system. However, you have a vacant lot right here at Karen and Lincoln, so you have the city limit line right here. If that property were to want to develop, we would require that that property annex in order to receive city services. Where it becomes more problematic is, say that this property was over here, not directly adjacent to the city limits. And so under this hybrid model, because it's a developable property, what that would basically require is that the property owner coordinate with the properties between them and the city limit line to encourage annexation so that you're annexing the entire area. That can be problematic at times, but just something for council's consideration. A fifth option would be do nothing and continue as is. If you continued as is, what would happen is we would treat every application on a case-by-case basis and bring it before council for council direction in terms of, does this property have to annex? Does this property connect per an extraterritorial service agreement? I would say that under the as-is scenario, if this property were to submit an application tomorrow, staff through the conditions of approval would write in a condition of approval recommending that they annex to the city. And so those conditions of approval would go before the Planning Commission, and then if the applicant didn't like the conditions of approval that were approved by the Planning Commission, it could be appealed to the City Council. So just some consideration as we talk about these hybrid models. So the recommendation tonight is to establish a policy for water and/or wastewater connections outside of the city limits and direct staff to prepare the necessary documents to formalize and execute the policy. So what that would look like is actually updating our ordinance so that it's, you could do it by ordinance or you could do it by resolution. We would recommend doing it by ordinance because we do have portions that are vague in the city's municipal code, and so this would provide clarification for applicants to be able to see exactly what the requirements would be. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Through the mayor, back to your one example, this is just sort of a follow-up. In your example, you pointed to the fourplex. I believe they had some issues and we were going to go ahead and take care of those or allow them to, did that occur?
Yeah, Mr. Moody left messages with the property manager, and I don't know if they haven't contacted him back yet, but basically we reached out to them to let them know that if they were interested in connecting to city sewer, it would require the execution of the extraterritorial agreement.
That's good. So they've been presented with the option, or at least we're trying to.
Yes.
I guess the follow-up for me is, again, having a fair amount of experience here working for the city and knowing the sometimes contentious nature of the provision of water and people's interest in getting our water, but perhaps not being part of our city. It's been my long-standing position that they should either have what used to be called the three-party agreement or now an extraterritorial agreement. I'm in favor of hybrid option number 4 as presented. I think that makes the most sense going forward for the city. I am cognizant of the fact that we do need to get some increase revenue from the fees, but however, I do think that folks that want to come into the city of Yuba City or receive the water services should be a member of the city, either through the extraterritorial agreement or if it's vacant land proposed for development at that time.
Through the mayor. Ms. Langley, my question concerns the new development. Using the hybrid method, they would be a condition of annexation. Would that annexation, I would assume, would occur prior, so we would have going through our planning department and our impact fees and everything prior to the project coming to fruition and connecting, not building the project and then connecting. We would be involved in that development process from the ground up if they wanted to connect to our services, correct, under hybrid method 4?
So for a new development project, what would happen is they submit their application. It goes through the normal channels in terms of review by city staff. City staff develops conditions of approval. Those conditions of approval and the project goes before the Planning Commission for approval. With that, the condition of approval would need to specify that the applicant needs to submit an application to LAFCO for annexation, and we would need concurrence from City Council in order to be able to submit that application. Now, when the actual annexation is required, the conditions of approval could be structured such that the annexation has to be complete either prior to certificate of occupancy or prior to receipt of water, because the annexation process can take a significant amount of time. So, to say that the annexation has to take place before, like, the map could record or before that they could, issue building permits, we wouldn't want to do that. We'd want to go ahead and allow them to start the project. But you would need some assurances from LAFCO that it would be approved for annexation as well. So it could be complex in terms of timing, and to be able to get it to a point that you would have assurance that it could be annexed through LAFCO and that the project could move forward.
Okay, my concern, and I is not so much in the timing, but with new development, I'm all in favor of helping the people that need help, the failing septic, things of that nature, that want to connect. That's not an issue. But if I'm a developer and I can go by county guidelines, not city guidelines, get connected to services, and then get annexed in, doesn't fit with our overall master plans and designs and everything. I would want us to, if they're going to do that, work with LAFCO, have everything in place to where it's treated as a city project from day one, let them develop, whether they pay all the impact fees and connection fees to the county, and then we get reimbursed once the annexation's done, but we don't miss out on that little bit of revenue because we're talking about, reducing impact fees, possibly looking at service fees, looking at connection fees, but we don't want to create a loophole
Right.
and a precedence by having a hybrid method.
Right. So what happens right now if a project application were to be submitted with the county to develop the project and the applicant said that they wanted city water and sewer, the county directs them to the city to receive a letter, a will serve letter from the city. So that would then be the trigger for us to see that, oh, okay, somebody submitted an application to the county. We'd actually want that project to annex to the city and be treated, be subject to city standards and requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Comment? Don't make the motion yet.
No motion. I'm just going to piggyback with Councilmember Boomgarden that I totally agree with the hybrid number 4. I just wanted to put that in. Thank you.
Okay. Before, so through the mayor, sorry, I concur with Councilmember Baumgarten.
Would any member of the public care to comment? Besides Bob? All right. Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to make a quick point to make sure everyone's aware. LAFCO timing, and I'm subject to be correction on this point, but LAFCO meets only every other month. And my guess is any annexation through LAFCO, you're talking 6 months minimum. So keep that in mind, please.
Thank you. If no further comment, I'll entertain a motion.
Cheers.
I will make a motion to the mayor. Request for water and or sewer connections outside of the city limits. It was been continued for March 5th council meeting. Recommendations from staff. And that was the hybrid number 4.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to move forward with option number 4, the hybrid, the so-called hybrid version. All those in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? All right, passes number 4.